I want to get your take on yet another day of misinformation, disinformation, obfuscation from Linda Burney, the Indigenous Affairs Minister, in this case pushed by Susan Lee, the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, on just what money has been spent on this Makarrata Commission. We know there's almost $5 million in the budget for it. It hasn't been agreed. We haven't voted on the voice. $900,000 has already been spent. On what? We don't know. Makarrata, of course, is how they will do the treaty making between Aboriginal Australia and not Aboriginal Australia, even though now the PM says, well, we don't believe in a national treaty. Here was Burney in the Parliament today.
I'd like to quote from the Uluru Statement and what it says about Makarrata. It says, Makarrata is a culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination.
Now, my view, the PM and all the Yes strategists have been getting advice from the pollsters. You talk about treaty, this thing's dead, and that's why they're so desperate to bury this.
I agree with you, Peter. That's 100% right. And we've seen this also with other matters like Australia Day, whether or not the Voice would be involved in Australia Day. Of course it would be involved in that matter, and it would have the remit to do so because it would be in the Constitution and capable of making its own decisions about what its priorities will be. It's the same as a treaty. The Prime Minister has been very clear, including on election night when he won. It was literally one of the first things he committed to was implementing the Uluru Statement from the Heart in full, and that means you have a voice, a treaty and so-called truth-telling. A voice is a critical part of a treaty because in all likelihood the voice to Parliament would be the body that would be overseeing and adjudicating on informing the treaty-making process because, as you know, Peter, it wouldn't just be one treaty. There's likely to be hundreds of treaties with the various different Indigenous communities across the nation who themselves are very diverse and have different perspectives on things. So I agree with you. I think they've got the polling back and they realise that, yes, Australians support recognition. Yes, we all want better outcomes for Indigenous people on the ground. But when they find out it's about Australia Day, it's about having a treaty, and that it's the first step of a much broader radical agenda, they raise very legitimate questions. And to go back to our earlier conversation, this is why the censorship that we're seeing is so concerning, because these are the kinds of questions that we're raising and many other people are raising, and it needs to be debated.
And you're debating them on social media because the government, you can see this in the chamber yesterday and today, are refusing to answer the questions and not putting the detail out there. Just before we go, this is huge news in Victoria today. There's been a secret deal between the Andrews government and a lot of Aboriginal communities that impact about 10 councils, 10 local councils across the greatest part of regional Victoria. And what's happened is the councils no longer will be able to name roads and bridges and public spaces, all of that. It will now be done by Aboriginal groups only. They'll get preferential access to council procurement contracts. As I said, they'll name every new road and new allotment in Victoria in these councils and have preferential access to jobs as well. Secret deal. It's, as I said, caused headlines in Victoria. What do you think of this?
Well, Peter, the two key words that you used there were secret and preferential. And that's been the hallmark of this entire debate about the Voice and what's going to come next. It's a secret deal because they don't want people to know the details, and they're getting preferential access, which is divisive. We've seen this in Western Australia playing out with the cultural heritage laws. We're seeing it here in Victoria now. This is just a small entree into what our entire nation could devolve into should the Voice to Parliament get up and then under the treaty-making process.
All right, Daniel Wild, thank you. Tomorrow night too, I hope to speak to one of the affected local councils. Not happy at all.